What I'm about to read from the Spirit of Prophecy moved me very deeply. And I was convicted to share it, just like the thing like with last week's sermon, too. It was just overwhelming that it had to be shared. And as I was reading it, I thought of loved ones in and out of the church that have talents, amazing talents, that they can exercise for the Lord that will bring souls into the fold. But sadly, I was also reminded that some choose rather to sit idly by and seek the comforts of life while all around them souls are perishing. They look upon the gifts they have been given that would help, many find Christ, as if utilizing them would upset their peaceful lot in life. And it's so sad. They have found a niche, if you will, in life that suits them, and they plan to sit there as long as possible. So as I read this today, I think of the talents that have been given unto you from our Lord and me and all of us. And are we truly doing everything that we can to further this message and get the truth out that only we can give if we are walking with Him who gives it? Or our soul's going to continue to perish all around us, because to witness to them would mean to upset our day-by-day routine. Now, before I read this, don't misunderstand me. Many of us are, in fact, already doing this work and are very blessed for it. And there's many ways to do the work. But what I'm about to share is not to be thought of as a way to push those that are already into doing the work into doing even more of the work. The Lord isn't asking for us to work hard be hard at work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Without rest. The fact that He's given us a seventh-day Sabbath each and every week proves He understands we need to rest. Because it's sure, we worship on the Sabbath, we keep this day holy, but we also rest on this day as well, as He did. We follow His example. However, He is asking those of us that aren't working to lighten the load of those that are taking too much of the burden upon themselves to do some work. This message today is mostly for those that say no to doing the work for whatever reason. No one here can know of your talents unless, of course, you broadcast them to us. That being said, only you and the Lord, who, by the way, gave you the talents in the first place, know you have the ability to do the work for Him. This message is also for those that are new to the faith, and mostly for them, because the grand majority of the people that are being affected, hopefully going to be affected by this, are the ones that are new, because you just never realize that you have a mighty work to do for the Lord by simply applying that which God has given you to do. Whatever your work is, or whatever your talent is, or whatever your love is. We all have talents and means by which to further the work. Each one of us has been created with a specific purpose in God's mind. And so I hope and I pray that by the end of this message, that given purpose convicts the heart to action. In Testimonies, Volume 4, starting at page 384, it says, on the morning of October 23rd, 1879, about 2 o'clock, so in other words, she was awakened by this, the Spirit of the Lord rested upon me, and I beheld scenes in the coming judgment. Language fails me in which to give an adequate description of the things which passed before me and of the effect they had upon my mind. The great day of the execution of God's judgment seemed to have come. 10,000 times 10,000 were assembled before a large throne, upon which was seated a person of majestic appearance. Several books were before Him, and upon the covers of each was written in the letters of gold, which seemed like a burning flame of fire, Ledger of Heaven. One of these books, containing the names of those who claimed to believe the truth, was then, hear what she just said, one of these books containing the names of those who claim to believe the truth was then opened immediately. It was opened, and then immediately, she says, I lost sight of the countless millions about the throne. And only those who were professedly children of the light and of the truth engaged my attention. As these persons were named one by one and their good deeds mentioned, Their countenances would light up with a holy joy that was reflected in every direction. But this did not seem to rest upon my mind with the greatest force. Another book was opened, wherein were recorded the sins of those who professed the truth. Under the general heading of selfishness came every other sin. There were also headings over every column, and underneath these, opposite each name, were recorded, in their respective columns, the lesser sins. Under covetousness came falsehood, theft, robbery, fraud, and avarice, or greed, for riches. Under ambition came pride and extravagance. Jealousy stood at the head of malice. Envy and hatred and intemperance headed a long list of fearful crimes, such as lasciviousness, that's lust. Everybody knows about that today. It's just all over the TV. And then adultery, indulgence of animal passions, etc. As I beheld, I was filled with inexpressible anguish and exclaimed, "Who can be saved? Who will stand justified before God? Whose robes are spotless? Who are faultless in the sight of a pure and holy God?" As the Holy One upon the throne slowly turned the leaves of the ledger, and his eyes rested for a moment upon individuals, his glance seemed to burn into their very souls, and at the same moment every word and action of their lives passed before their minds as clearly as though traced before their vision in letters of fire. Trembling seized them, and their faces turned pale. Their first appearance when around the throne was that of careless indifference, but how changed their appearance now! The feeling of security is gone, and in its place is a nameless terror. A dread is upon every soul, lest he shall be found among those who were wanting. Every eye is riveted upon the face of the one upon the throne, and as his solemn, searching eye sweeps over that company, there is a quaking of heart, for they are self-condemned without one word being uttered. In anguish of soul, each declares his own guilt with terrible vividness, sees that by sinning he has thrown away the precious boon of eternal life. One class were registered as cumberers of the ground. As the piercing eye of the judge rested upon these, their sins of neglect were distinctly revealed. With pale, quivering lips, they acknowledged that they had been traitors to their holy trust. They had had warnings and privileges, but they had not heeded nor improved them. They could now see that they had presumed too much upon the mercy of God. True, they had not such confessions to make as had the vile and basely corrupt, but like the fig tree, they were cursed because they bore no fruit, because they had not put to use the talents entrusted to them. In other words, they didn't have the graphic sins of the wicked to confess, but they were just as guilty in that they did not use that which God gave them to further the work. If you have the truth, it is your duty to share it in whatever way you can. It could be by preaching, teaching, singing, sharing with a friend, or artwork, or by the very means God has given. It could be your time to help others, donations to further the work, or passing out tracts. Or as Brother Dick said last night, to simply reflect the character of Jesus Christ, which is everybody's duty, by the way, because some of us don't have the ability to do a lot of things. But we have one talent or whatever. You know how the parable goes. But wherever we are in life, if we reflect the character of Christ, and we are found worthy of doing such a task, another talent is given unto us so that we can do even more. Sister White goes on to say, this class had made self supreme, laboring only for selfish interests. They were not rich toward God, not having responded to his claims upon them. Although professing to be servants of Christ, they brought no souls to him. Had the cause of God become dependent on their efforts, it would have languished For they not only withheld the means lent them of God, but they withheld themselves. But these could now see and feel that in occupying an irresponsible position in reference to the work and cause of God, they had placed themselves on the left hand. That's a scary position, by the way. They had had opportunity, she says, but would not do the work that they could have, or that they could and should have done. The names of all who professed the truth were mentioned. Some were reproved for their unbelief, others for having been slothful servants. They had allowed others to do the work in the master's vineyard and to bear the heaviest responsibilities, while they were selfishly serving their own temporal interests. Had they cultivated the abilities God had given them, they could have been reliable burden bearers working for the interest of the master. Said the judge, all will be justified by their faith and judged by their works. How vividly then appeared their neglect, and how wise the arrangement of God in giving to every man a work to do, to promote the cause and save his fellow man. Each was to demonstrate a living faith in his family and in his neighborhood by showing kindness to the poor, sympathizing with the afflicted, engaging in missionary labor, and by aiding the cause of God with his means. In other words, whatever God has given you to further the work, whether it be to gift of preaching, song, artistry, healing, teaching, or even as Nicodemus, some have been given riches to help fund the work. Sadly, today, most with riches do as the certain ruler did in Luke 18. They walk away when they found out they should use the riches to do God's work. But she goes on to say, but like Moreau's, the curse of God rested upon them for what they had not done. They had loved that work which would bring the greatest profit in this life, and opposite their names in the ledger devoted to good works, there was a mournful blank. The words spoken to these were most solemn. You are weighed in the balances and found wanting. You have neglected spiritual responsibilities because of busy activity in temporal matters. While your very position of trust made it necessary that you should have more than human wisdom and greater than finite judgment, this you needed in order to perform even the mechanical part of your labor. And when you disconnected God and his glory from your business, you turned from his blessing. The question was then asked, why have you not washed your robes of character and made them white in the blood of the Lamb? God sent his Son into the world, not to condemn the world, but that through him it might be saved. My love for you has been more self-denying than a mother's love. It was that I might blot out your dark record of iniquity and put the cup of salvation to your lips, that I suffered the death of the cross, bearing the weight and curse of your guilt, the pangs of death and the horrors of the darkness of the tomb. I endured that I might conquer him who had the power of death, unbar the prison house, and open for you the gates of life. I submitted to shame and agony because I loved you with an infinite love and would bring back my wayward, wandering sheep to the paradise of God, to the tree of life, that life of bliss which I purchased for you at such a cost you have disregarded. Shame, reproach, and monogamy, such as your master bore for you, you have shunned. The privileges he died to bring within your reach have not been appreciated. You would not be a partaker of his sufferings, and you cannot now be partaker with him in glory, of his glory. Then were uttered these solemn words, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. We all know when this is pronounced, by the way, in the very last days, right when the plagues start. This is speaking of our day, if we're alive at that time. She goes on to say that the book was then closed, and the mantle fell from the person on the throne, revealing the terrible glory of the Son of God. The scene then passed away, and I found myself still upon the earth, inexpressibly grateful that the day of God had not yet come, and that precious probationary time is still granted us in which to prepare for eternity. We have a work, and we have little time left to do this work, brothers and sisters. No, I'm not suggesting you quit your jobs and go into missionary work full-time. The Lord needs you right where you are in life. His people are to be everywhere to proclaim this loud cry. Doctors, lawyers, carpenters, plumbers, truckers, welders, nurses, waitresses, teachers. I mean, 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. And to top it off, we are students of prophecy. We have a great responsibility upon us. He gave us this wisdom and understanding of his truth for a reason. We have the God-given ability to look around and see there is precious little time left. We know this because Jesus said before he returns that his followers in Jerusalem must flee to the mountains and in Jerusalem will be destroyed. That happened 2,000 years ago. It was also prophesied that the followers of Jesus will experience a great persecution or tribulation before his return. That great tribulation ended just over 200 years ago. Prophecy also tells us there is going to be a global earthquake before the sun is darkened and the moon becomes as blood. That happened 255 years ago. Jesus said the sun will be turned to darkness, the moon will be turned into the appearance of blood, the stars shall fall from heaven. That has been documented as happening over 200 years ago. It was also prophesied that trouble between capital and labor will start, and that started 116 years ago. And by the way, the prophecies I just shared have to do with the prophetic events that would occur just before the official end times began. These next prophecies I'd like to share speak of when it's really close to the end. Jesus also said that there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, and just under 100 years ago, the world wars started. Another prophecy regarding the distress, perplexity, and fear within all nations has also been seen to have begun right around the time those wars started. And Daniel prophesied that when the end times began, now it shall be increased. This was documented as fulfilled and rapidly increasing as prophesied by both the secular and spiritual leaders in the year of 1803. And scoffers that will not endorse sound doctrine were also prophesied to start right near the end. And now we have everyone from atheists, pagans, and popes declaring the end is not yet near. When we get real close to the end, there will be a widespread immorality and a decline of spirituality. I mean, look around. That is today's society. Anyone with a TV, internet, or access to a newspaper can verify that as fact. It was also prophesied that in the last days there will be a craze for pleasure. Everything from drugs, sex, porn, vacation resorts, food, extreme sports, and even serial killings prove that anything that makes the flesh happy is going to be embraced today, and it is being embraced today. Numerous prophecies predicted that in our day there would be no regard for law, bloody crimes and violence will increase and be done in broad daylight. And it's not just talking about drive-by shootings either or other insane acts of violence within the inner cities. Now, leaders, our politicians and our national leaders are actually allowing the killing of people in the streets using guillotines, stonings, burning car tires, large meat grinders, or the good old-fashioned mob violence. Another obvious prophecy for the very last days would be the earthquakes, the storms, the pestilences, and the famines increasing in numbers. I mean, I'm not going to get into the last 3 earthquakes alone that killed now think about this. The last 3 quakes alone killed well over 500,000 people. The tsunami, of course, being the first one, with 300,000 dead when that water came in. That was a quake that they're saying, or it could have been an atomic blast. We don't know. None of us are scientists. All we know is it was a quake, 300,000 died. I mean, before the end time actually officially began in the year 1844, there were 21 major earthquakes wherein more than 10,000 people were realized to have died for every quake. I mean, there was a bunch more than 21, but they all had 5,000 and down in deaths, right? They recorded these facts during a 1,300-year tracking system. That's, in other words, 21 major quakes in 1,370 years, because they didn't track quakes before then, I guess. Well, between the years 1906 to just 1990, there were also 21 major earthquakes with more than 10,000 dead. That's just up to 1990. In just 84 years, the world's quake toll jumped 200 times higher in number, and that's just for the 10,000 dead or more. I'm not counting all the little ones that were in between 1906 and 1990. And back in 1996, they recorded over 4,000 earthquakes in 3 days. Small ones, yeah, but they were earthquakes nonetheless. Jesus also said homosexuality will be a permanent feature in today's society when the eastern sky splits. As we look at all the countries that allow homosexual marriage and laws being passed to protect the lifestyle wherein even Christians are jailed, trying to help them, this too is fulfilled prophecy for our day. One of the very last prophecies is that the gospel is to be preached worldwide in the very end. This too has happened. CDs, DVDs, tapes, books, satellites, TV, radio, preachers, and yes, the internet itself has seen the gospel preached all around the world now. And finally, according to the Word of God, right before the end, many will turn to seducing spirits and lies of the occult will be accepted worldwide. And now, thanks to Harry Potter being pushed forward by the popes of Rome, they literally condone that in writing, that it's good for your children to watch Harry Potter. And then we also have the Satanic Church that actually become an official recognized religion in the 1960s, 1966 to be exact. Heavy metal headbanging rock bands like Led Zeppelin, and that's just the mediocre heavy metal from the 1970s. I'm not talking about the thrash or death metal of today with their insane occultic symbolism and all this other stuff. And then teachers indoctrinating children as young as 5 years old with everything from homosexuality to Harry Potter. And then you got your video games loaded down with spells and potions and occult symbolism, and even cartoons in the morning for your kids to watch. I remember He-Man, Masters of the Universe back in the 70s that had all those witchcraft symbols on their belt buckles. The occult lifestyle is now a permanent feature of society. In fact, it is now law that witches are allowed religious services in prisons. They have been accepted as a religion. So that prophecy, too, has been fulfilled. Now, do you see why none of the churches preach prophecy? Satan knows if they understand what time it is, they will prepare their souls to meet the Lord. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 2 to 3 says, "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief of the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." This passage is rarely preached often in the churches because of where it leads the hearer. First off, we see that Jesus is coming as a thief of the night to many that proclaim peace and safety in the last days. And in 1998, John Paul II released an article that confirms this passage as fulfilled. He stated in the Times, I guess it was I don't know if this was the Times Online or not, I don't think it was the Times Online, but it was the Times on April 24th, 1998. It said in the article, the article was headlined, "Pope Assures Italians the End is Not Yet Nigh." And the article, and I'm just taking a little excerpt out of the article, it says, "To the dismay of Seventh-day Adventists, but to the relief of everyone else, the Pope has declared that the world is not about to end." The only reason they mention that the SDA people here is because they are the ones that were originally known to understand prophecy. That torch has been passed to us, has been made obvious now for decades. Still, the world is in their night season because they don't trust the light of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord will come unexpected to them as a thief. As we read the next verse, we find an amazing promise. It's in verse 4. "But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." That's specifically for us. This is the main reason this passage is never preached today. Imagine if it were. The congregation would have to ask the pastor, "Pastor, why is it the Word says we won't be caught off guard when Jesus comes?" The pastor would then have to say, "Well, because you understand prophecy, my dear loved ones." But he knows they don't understand prophecy because he never teaches or preaches it. In fact, the pastor himself was never taught it either. Most blessed teachers today have never stepped foot in any seminaries or Bible colleges because they refuse to touch on present truth. This is also why John the Baptist was chosen of God and the men of the cloth were passed by in his day. Luke 1:17 says, "And he shall go before them in the spirit and power of Elias, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." So, are we not prophesied to go before the people in that same spirit of Elijah? As students of prophecy, we have a mighty calling before us. No other people in the history of mankind have been prophesied to do what we are to do. Like John the Baptist or Elijah himself, we are looked upon by our God as the ones chosen to do this final work. Like back then, the men of the cloth were ignored by the Spirit of God, and John was chosen to go forth and make ready a people to meet the Lord. We know things that 99% of the Christian world out there simply doesn't know. They may have bits and pieces of our understanding, but they don't have it the way we have it. There's a reason for this. Our very own children know more than all of their pastors. Not some of them, all of their pastors. What does this tell you? The Lord doesn't give this information to a people without a purpose in mind. He gives it to a certain people because he is going to have them do a work for him. And by the way, don't think that you have to be a super Christian to do a work. Don't think that you have to bring in thousands and thousands of souls to generate a smile upon your Father's face. In Gospel Workers, it clearly says, page 267, "It is not the results we attain, but the motives from which we act that weigh with God. He prizes goodness and faithfulness above all else. I mean, case in point, look at Noah. How many people listened to him? Sure, some did, but they still were allowed to go to their graves because they wouldn't have fit in the ark anyway, but still. The overwhelming grand majority of the people died in that flood, except for the 8 souls in that ark. So just do the best you can. Again, like Brother Dick shared with us last night during the study, it's the character of Christ that you reflect that is our first and most important work. So you don't have to quit your job. You can reflect Christ right where you're at, and guess what? As your Father watches you and sees that you're faithful to doing that, He's going to give you another work to do, and you never know. You may end up going full-time in the ministry like I did 8 years ago. I just realized that because this is February, and that's when it happened. 2002, in February, He called me out. So just do the best you can. This is all He asks you to do. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. Sister White again says in Testimonies, Volume 4, but now it's page 537, paragraph 2, she says, God will not place His benediction upon those who are negligent, selfish, and ease-loving, who will not lift burdens in His cause. In other words, that latter rain that's falling and starting to drizzle now, you're not going to get wet unless you do your part. Moses and the Israelites could not go forward on a dry riverbed until they made the act of faith. And then, of course, the water wouldn't even split until Moses put forth the staff. She goes on to say that the well done, like where Jesus says, well done, thy good and faithful servant. She says the well done will be pronounced upon those only who have done well. In other words, you're not going to catch Jesus fabricating. I mean, that's pretty blunt. We all know that. He'll say well done because it is well done. Period. Every man is to be rewarded according as his work shall be. We want an active ministry, men of prayer who will wrestle with God as did Jacob, saying, I will not let thee go except thou bless me. There's another thing another thought that comes to mind. Remember we were just reading about with Martin Luther, praying 3 hours a day? I mean, he couldn't do the work. He was in hiding, right? And so he's praying 3 hours a day. She goes on, if we obtain the victor's crown, we must stretch every nerve and exercise every power. We can never be saved in inactivity. To be an idler in the Lord's vineyard is to relinquish all title to the reward of the righteous. So I ask, are we not striving to be a people that are known of God and mentioned in His prophecy as being ready when that day comes? Are we not striving to be a people that are known of God and mentioned in His prophecy that are the only ones alive when that day comes that will do a wonderful work for the Lord? And are we not striving to be a people that are known of this God that we worship and mentioned in His prophecies that will broadcast a loud cry around the world? I mean, seriously, do you know anyone else out there in your area that knows what you know? Even the people in the Seventh-day Adventist Church who used to teach and preach the three angels' message, by the way, are amazed when they hear one of our messages. They literally proclaim they never heard such things before. I know. I get emails like this on a regular basis from Seventh-day Adventists. There is a reason we have this truth to proclaim, and there's a reason they don't. We are in the Church of Christ. They are not. There has been a shaking, and they misunderstand the shaking. They think the shaking is to be shaken out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. No, the shaking is to be shaken out of the Church of Christ. If you stay in the Church of the Seventh-day Adventists, you are literally being shaken out of the Church of Christ. So you have the devil flip-flop the whole thing to make them think in another way using their eyeballs instead of using their heart. Sister White says in Testimonies, Volume 4, page 453, paragraph 1, she says, every hour's work passes in review before God and is registered. Now, that's not every hour's rest. It's His work. I mean, you have time to rest just like anybody else. But every hour's work, when you should be working, passes in review before God and is registered for faithfulness or unfaithfulness. The record of wasted moments and unimproved opportunities must be met when the judgment shall sit and the books shall be opened, and everyone shall be judged according to the things written in the books. Selfishness, envy, pride, jealousy, idleness, or any other sin which is cherished in the heart will exclude one from the blessedness of heaven. To whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, His servants ye are. Now, one thing I've noticed as I do the work, When I started early on, yes, I was tempted of Satan not to do the work because of all sorts of assumptions whispered in my ear that declared you're going to lose your friends. Your family's going to hate you. Life will be filled with toil and terror. I mean, it just never ended. But yeah. For most of us, this is on the table. This is our lot in life. But what the enemy of souls doesn't mention is the joy that wells up in your heart when you see the eyes of a soul light up when the truth is made known to them and it clicks. He doesn't mention the peace you have deep inside your heart knowing your Father is pleased with the work you're doing. He never mentions that true, trustworthy friends will be brought to you that will replace the so-called friends and even family members that have left you. I mean, is it not written in Proverbs 18:24 that a friend sticketh closer than a brother? Satan also refuses to mention that new loved ones that have deep respect for you and the Lord you worship will now become a part of your life. Every need will be supplied by a God that owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Every prayer will be heard. Every day a new adventure in the work. Every opportunity in sharing these wonderful truths will be like it was the very first time you ever shared it. And even though it sometimes brings grief, because those that hear it are going to be angered sometimes, His truth will still be fresh with heavenly zeal, and it will light up your heart just like the fire that welled up in Jeremiah's heart. In Jeremiah 20, verses 8 and 9, he says, "For since I spake, I cried out. I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me." When I spoke, it was a problem for me, and a derision daily. Then I said, "I will not make any mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in my heart, as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay." In other words, he knew the truth was causing some to generate problems for him. He even said to himself he was never going to speak about it again. But the love of the truth was unquenchable, and he just couldn't stop it from moving across his lips. And I know, and a lot of you know what he's talking about here. We all know about this. You can't shut up when the opportunity presents itself. Another thing the enemy of souls won't tell you is the zeal. A heavenly ambition to further the work of God will literally become yours, and signs and wonders will follow the work as promised in Mark 16. There's a lot of things the devil doesn't tell. This is like when he was tempting Jesus on the mountain and says, bow and I'll give you all these wonderful kingdoms, right? He doesn't tell him about the wars and this, that. He doesn't tell him about the bad things. Now he's only telling him about the good things, right? Well, the other flip of the coin is, like when you go to do the work, he tells you all the bad things are going to happen when you do it. He doesn't tell you all the good things. In Luke 10:17, it says, "And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through your name." Don't you want to see his hand move like that? And I'm talking to the young ones, of course, that are having a little bit of difficulty getting out there and doing it. Most of you already know what's going on, and you're already doing the work. In Lift Him Up, page 274, paragraph 6, it says, "Christ is waiting with longing desire for the manifestation of himself in his church. When the character of Christ shall be perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim his own." He isn't coming because of us. Again, many of you are doing the work, and I praise God for the work that you're doing. We could not do it without you. And I pray the young ones that are new to the faith understand the reason he has called them to his truth. If you have studied the prophecies like all his remnant does, you have all the proof you need. Christian prophecy is real. It's going to happen. In fact, you know this because as you study his prophecy, you already know that 99% of it has already happened. You have concrete evidence of something that nothing else in the world can shine a light towards. Nothing can hold a candle to Christian prophecy. You have overwhelming evidence. The end times have already begun 166 years ago. It started on October 22nd, 1844, just like Daniel prophesied it would. So we have had 46 years more than Noah did to preach this truth. He had 120 years when he was building that ark. We've so far had 166. It's time to make a choice, dear ones. If you do as his Spirit is moving you to do, you're going to be blessed with joy, peace, happiness, a blessed life, a work to do, new friends, loved ones. To top it off, a smile on the face of your God as he declares to you on that day, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord."